Probably the best way to create navigation on your website is to create it using a list and styling that list with CSS. Now that doesn't sound to be very fancy, but if we're looking at this page, as you can see, our list, which is normally straight up and down, is now next to each other, each of the buttons, and as we roll over we have a color that appears that kind of gives an indicator to people that this is interactive. Now this is what we're hoping for with this site. We're just using solid colors, keeping it plain, keeping it simple. It still looks good and goes with the actual design scheme of our site, but there are much fancier ways to do these lists. If you search in Google for something called List-O-Matic, it's at css.maxdesign.com.au/List-O-Matic. So that's why I say just put it in Google. But as we come to each of these, there's different ways to create vertical lists and different ways to create horizontal lists. So if I click on Jeffrey Zeldman's DWWS menu, you can see that we have rollovers, but we also have an active state to show people which page is the current active one. It shows you what it should look like in your HTML, and it shows you what it should look like in your CSS. So this is what we're hoping for. Now, you might be in a different stage of your website. Currently, my website looks like this. So it's not great. It just has the divs with garish background colors. You might have already laid out and positioned it, added all your background images. You might already have a slideshow. It doesn't really matter what state your website's in, because whether you do this now or you do this in, when everything is already built out, it's going to have pretty much the same result. So let's look at our code. Right now we have a div with the ID of navigation, and at this point all of our navigation was in paragraphs. And that's not going to work for us, because when we're creating navigation with CSS, it's a better idea to make sure that they're all part of a list. So we're going to need to change this out. So first we're going to change all of these to list items. So we're going to copy and paste just because that's a lot easier to do. And again, if we open a list item, we have to close it. And last but not least, we need to actually add an unordered list. And here's the thing. Right now, my div is called navigation. Unfortunately, this is actually the navbar. The actual div would be the navbar, and the unordered list itself should be navigation. So we're going to have to do a little fixing here as well. I'm going to give this one an ID of navigation. And this one I'm going to give the ID of navbar. And now when I come to my CSS, I need to change that div from navigation to navbar. Alright, so let's save and refresh. Okay, so there's our list. Now we just need to do a couple things with this list. We need to make sure that the dots go away. We need to make sure that they appear as inline elements so they can sit next to each other. And we need to add that hover so that we have some color interactivity when people move their mouse over it. So let's go through these first by dealing with the navbar. We're eventually going to change it from thistle to this background color, but I'm going to leave all my colors garish right now so that we can see what's happening with each one of these. So let me zoom this, make this a little bit, fit a little bit more so we can see what's happening. Okay, so with this navbar, we're going to go ahead and say margin top 0 pixels. Now, normally with web design, I would have you do something called a global selector at the very top that gets rid of all margins and padding, but since this is web design 1, we're not going to do that. So let's go ahead and see what that does. Again, we can save it and refresh it. And right now it doesn't look like it did anything to the navbar, but in a second you're going to see that this helps us deal with the slideshow that's going to be sitting on top of it. So let's go ahead and change the height to 35 pixels. And normally we don't change the height, but for this particular method we will have to. And now it looks a little bit funky because it's not holding the entire list, but we're going to deal with that in a second. So let's add some padding. And this just allows the navigation inside of it to sit a little bit away from the edges. So refresh that. So again, we have a little bit of padding. And text align, center, because we want all of our buttons to be centered in that nav bar. And finally, margin bottom 15 pixels. Okay, so those margins aren't going to show you anything happening with them yet, just because we don't have the rest of the site built and we need the slideshow up here. But trust me, there's something that we will need. Now later when we get done with this navigation, feel free to actually, change these and do huge numbers to see what's affecting what. So now we need to actually style the navigation itself, and we're going to do that by starting with the list items. So we'll do navigation LI. So we're styling all the list items in our navigation. And our first property is going to be list, style, type, and we want to do none. What that's going to do is that's going to remove the dots, and then we want to do display inline. And again, right now list items are block level elements, so that means that they sit on top of each other. But when we tell it should behave like an inline, that's when we start to get that kind of nav bar going on. So let's go to margin right. So we're going to push this away from the right hand side by 30 pixels. And again, this is going to add, and remember, it's not the whole list, it's to each list item. So we just added 30 pixels to the right of each of these, so we pushed them away from each other. So now what we need to do, we can add the font weight bold, and this will apply whether it's a link, whether it's on hover, because we put it in the list item. Alright, so once we're done styling the list item, we need to actually style the links that are in the list item. Navigation LIA. So basically what we're saying with this one is we're styling all the links within a list item within the ID of navigation. If we didn't put this ID of navigation, it would style all the links that are within every list item. So if you had a list in your content area that had a link to, let's say, Google, all of a sudden it would look weird and like a button. So let's go ahead and see what happens here. So for text decoration, we're going to say none. And what that's going to get rid of is the underline that all links have. So if we'll refresh that, then that gets rid of that. And we're going to change the background color. And again, I'm going to do something really garish just because I want to see if it's working and how it's working. So let's refresh that. And now the link itself, as you can see, it's really, really tight because we haven't added any kind of padding, but now we can see what it's doing. And let's see, the color of the font, we want to change that to kind of a light color that mimics the rest of our design on our site. Oops, E6D9CA. Save that, refresh it. So it has sort of that tan color. And now we want to do padding right. And we're going to see what each of these does by hitting save and refreshing after each one of them. So the padding on the right, so that's going to give us that space on the right. So then we can do padding left. And if you know how to do shorthand, you could definitely do shorthand, but I want to make sure that you can read this and see what's doing what. So save and refresh. So that gives us padding on the left. And again, we'll spread that out so we can make sure to see it. And then where are we at? Oh. Alright, padding top 4 pixels and padding bottom 4 pixels. So again, shorthand would be best. but hopefully this shows you now we've got some buttons going on. Alright, so once we get all that figured out, now we just need to do navigation LIA hover, because we want to change what it looks like when we hover over them. So again, navigation, list item, link, and when we're hovered over that link. So for this, we want a different background color, and we'll just do lime green for now, and refresh. And now when we hover over it, we can see that lime green. So let's just do blue, and save, and refresh. And now you can see that blue happening. So then it's just a matter of changing all of our colors. Our nav bar, we're going to change that color to fit our site. So for that, it's going to be 39170C. So we'll save, and we'll hit refresh. And then for the LI itself, we don't need to worry about any kind of color. And for the link, the background color, instead of being red, we're going to actually have it the exact same color as this. So you could choose to have a different color so that it's slightly different from this if you wanted to. And then the rollover, we're going to create that a little bit lighter. So 7E6350. So let's save and refresh. And now when we roll over, we see that happening there. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is our navigation isn't necessarily sitting correctly vertically in this page. So we could style the actual unordered list, the UL, but we're going to give this a class called noIndent. And I just do that because I don't want it to affect this UL, which sometimes it'll cause problems. Normally I wouldn't do this class noIndent either, but because we don't have that global selector I mentioned earlier, we're just going to have to go with it. So for this noIndent class, let's go ahead and add this CSS. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to do margin top 5 pixels. Let's see, margin right 0 pixels. And margin left 5 pixels. Again, you can do the shorthand if you want to. Padding right 0 pixels, and padding left 10 pixels. Okay, so let's see what that did. And it looks like it's not doing it. Oh, we got to save this. That's why. Alright, so now that's sitting correctly on our page. And again, we just did that so that we could take out that generic default padding and margins and space, whatever that the browser gives you. Normally, we would get rid of that using something called the global selector. And because this is Web Design 1, again, we didn't do that, but we have to accommodate the fact that it creates generic spacing and margins and padding for us by creating this little class rule that we added to the UL itself. So it may or may not look ready to go. If, again, you've already built your site, you might need to tweak it a little bit just to make sure it looks correct, especially with whatever slideshow you've chosen. But otherwise, this is ready for me to now build the slideshow and finish the rest of my page and get all these garish colors out and put my actual design in, and then my page should be done.